Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, November 29th, 2018. Time for yet another show. Can you believe in 10 years you'll be dating this show? I don't know. I'm not sure where we're going to go today. It's chock full of news. We could go in any one of 55 directions, and I think I'm leaving out about, I don't know, the better portion of them. If I said we could talk about, the Deutsche Bank raid this morning. That's the latest news, I think. Apparently, the international bank raided on money laundering charges, and I don't even know which offices they decided to go through. But if you know anybody that has any interests tied up in Deutsche Bank, let me know. We can probably investigate that, of course. Apparently, it's related to the Panama Papers, so we're going to have to get caught up on that one. Bill reminds me that we have got some other avenues to explore today by tweeting out his Daily Kos Radio is live now tweet, as he does most mornings. Kagro X delivers all the news today that the mainstream media will eventually catch up with months from now. How does he do it? That's the question. The answer is I actually read the mainstream media the first time they report these things. I don't do any of this. It's actually our stupid media who we hate so much. Occasionally does, in fact, do all these things and do them very well. Great credit, I think, to the Miami Herald and the writers there for finding a way to get America interested in this story, which has been out there for quite a long time today. I'm very happy that people are talking about it. They've got a news hook, and we're definitely going to want to talk about that for sure. Jeffrey Epstein leading that news. And, of course, we're now beginning to realize not only did Jeffrey Epstein have direct connections to Donald Trump, but the big news hook on the story in the Herald, and I think it's a great one, is that, Alex Acosta, who is currently the labor secretary in Trump's cabinet, was the prosecutor chiefly responsible for engineering the sweetheart deal of all sweetheart deals for Jeffrey Epstein once he was finally busted for his pedophile sex trafficking ring. And there's really no other way to describe it, and it requires no hyperbole to get there. That's what everybody says it was. That's what he says it was. But, man, we got some detail from the Herald about the conditions of his imprisonment, if you can even call it that. And, that's going to stir a lot of controversy. And and it's too long to read because it's like a 3-part series. Each one probably would take us an hour plus to go through. Anyway, Greg Dworkin also has a raft of stories lined up. I don't even know. There's about 15 other gigantic ones that are almost guaranteed to come up today. And then 15 more that we're just going to have to miss. About, let's say, 11 of which will come up on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy later on with Justice Putnam. But Greg is here, and Greg has the information also on the Deutsche Bank raids. This, strangely enough, it happened in Germany. And, that's kind of where you would think that bank is. But that basically tells you, headquarters. They think the whole operation, Frankfurt. Must be about money laundering. And Frankfurt, by the way, excellent snacks they have there. Their sausages. People love them around the world. Not sure if they're sandwiches, but we could look into that later on.
Well, that's a good question. You know what I'm going to do? There's so much to talk about.
Yes.
But I'm going to talk about
sandwiches?
Some old friends first.
Okay.
So let's start with old friend David Neer. David's not old, but he's been a friend for a long time. He's the elections director over at Daily Kos. And he had a story that actually, an observation that made it all the way to Rachel Maddow last night.
Yes.
And he was talking about how the New York Times covers Democratic versus Republican politics. It's really kind of interesting. As you may have heard, Nancy Pelosi was running for Speaker.
Yes, I heard about
that.
And
she actually did quite well yesterday.
Yes, I helped her out a little bit. I didn't.
Yeah, and she got votes in the Democratic caucus, and I guess you'll help explain this. In the Democratic caucus, some of the non-voting members, like from the territories, get the vote, but they don't necessarily get the vote in the House for the actual speaker vote?
Yes, that's right. Well, yeah, it's a thing we have with the Constitution. The members who aren't from states aren't, I think constitutionally speaking, just not entitled to a vote on the floor, since the makeup of the Congress is pretty clear and spelled out in the Constitution. So if you're not from a state, you're kind of out of luck. Under our House rules that Democrats like to adopt, they can vote in committees, and because that's not the House of Representatives, so that's not described in the Constitution. So other subgroups of the House they can vote in, but Republicans exclude them.
Right, but it's just one of those interesting things. So it's really only a Democratic thing. Pretty
much. I suppose if there were more Republicans among the delegates, they might allow them to vote.
Right.
Maybe.
So, or if they needed
Maybe
to vote, they
racist.
might change the rules, and then all of a sudden they could vote, because that happens too, right?
Yeah, they could do that, although I think they'd have a hard time overcoming the constitutional problem if they're from, outside of the states, essentially.
Right.
So.
And just so you know, and this is one of the topics we are going to get to, which is the Mueller investigation. George Stephanopoulos just tweeted breaking news, special report on breaking news in the Mueller investigation imminent.
Oh. And that was Stephanopoulos,
that will probably
not
break
Papadopoulos.
While we're on the show, so I just thought you should know.
Okay.
So anyway, David pointed out that Nancy Pelosi did quite well, but that's not how the New York Times covered it. When Paul Ryan was elected Speaker, the story was Republicans nominate Paul Ryan as House Speaker, and he won the overwhelming support of his colleagues, and the nominating contest is now set to be installed as Speaker in a formal vote. Republicans said the vote was 200 to 43 over Representative Daniel Webster, Mr. Ryan's closest rival. So at the time, he got 200 votes, he got 43 against. It was actually somebody running against him, and he was overwhelmingly elected. The way the Times originally wrote up yesterday was Democrats nominate Pelosi to be Speaker, but with significant defections.
Oh, I see.
And she handily won, but with 32 Democrats voting no, well short of the number she'll need to reclaim the gavel in January. And you see the difference in how they were covered.
Yes.
She had nobody running against her. It's not likely that she's going to be denied the gavel. And in fact, David pointed this out. It was kind of we covered Democrats different than Republicans, and then the Times changed it after that and said Democrats resoundingly nominate Pelosi as Speaker, but defections signal fight ahead. And that was a little bit different than the original, but that's how it rolls. That's how they do it.
Well, yes, and I see this. Pardon me. This is going to take me about 15 minutes to get over this. I see this morning that the New York Times has changed their story. Is that what happened?
They rewrote it.
They rewrote it. Okay. So now they've it says I see your tweet here, or the one you grabbed from David. They've completely changed its. Did they change their story, or they changed their approach?
No, they changed their approach.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they often will do that. There are some websites and Twitter accounts.
Okay. Yes, I see.
That they keep track of changes.
I got you. Yeah. So now they're
now they're a little bit more in line. It really was a resounding victory, and that's how it should be presented. Yeah. But that's one of the things that was out there. Another thing that was out there is the California 21 election, and all of the votes are in from the Republican areas.
Okay.
And the only one outstanding is the big Democratic area. And there's still a 500 some odd vote lead, and therefore the Democrat running in California 21 has declared victory. We'll see if AP actually catches up to that. And then the third piece that we have to just up to date in terms of elections actually was the story that we were talking about yesterday, that North Carolina 9 was not certified because of irregularities.
Okay, yes.
We didn't know what the irregularities were, but now we do. The board is investigating potential absentee ballot irregularities in the 9th Congressional District. The Republican won by about 400 some odd votes, But it turns out board members unanimously voted to certify final tallies in all the elections held earlier, but didn't sign off on that one. And actually, Dan McCready, the Democrat, trails by 905 votes. But apparently the problem is that there's an awful lot of absentee ballots.
Okay.
And they're trying to figure out why there are so many absentee ballots.
I don't know.
Okay. And it's from this one county. And again, you will remember that somebody had complained that they seem to do this all the time. So the question is, are absentee ballots somehow appearing that are changing the election results? That's really, I guess, the issue. Elections officials confirmed Wednesday that an election investigator seized completed absentee ballot request forms and absentee container envelopes November 7th, the day after the election. Steve Stone, chair of the Robeson County Board of Elections, said state investigators had requested information the county board kept on an unusual number of absentee ballot requests. Stone said county election officials began keeping logs of who dropped off large numbers of registration forms and absentee ballot requests and later reported the concerns to the state board in August. Stone said county residents had reported that people were going door to door telling voters their registrations had been dropped, they needed to re-register, and they were asked to sign an absentee ballot request form.
Okay. And
so they were knocking on doors and saying, "Oh, you're not registered. Re-register, sign here. We'll do your absentee ballot for you." Okay.
So no real idea whether they were registered or not. They just said it so that they would start signing things. And I guess if you're registered and what happens if you're registered and you sign a new registration form? I guess nothing happens.
But I'm not sure exactly where this goes, but the whole process of how they're doing the election didn't feel right, as they like to say. So that's really what it was. I don't know that changes the results or invalidates the results or what happens at this point, but that's the issue. Since we brought it up on the show yesterday, thought we'd do a little follow-up there.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to do some more at some point. I'd be real interested to know
it's a sort
all those people. Well. Yeah, I wonder if those absentee ballots didn't go to the addresses that the people are registered at. That would be super interesting.
Right. So here's apparently the Mueller stuff that's breaking. Michael Cohen told lawmakers last year in sworn testimony he didn't know whether Donald Trump had foreknowledge of the 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians.
Okay, he did, but yeah.
But now he says he lied.
Oh, well. So
Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to congressional committees investigating Trump collusion, sources tell ABC News. Wow. So if that's what he lied about, that's bad, but of course we don't know the details.
Okay. Yeah, is that a tweet you found somewhere? You can pass that on. I'll include that in our roundup. Okay, he's saying he's lying about his prior testimony to Congress. Was that right? About, well, I'll read it. Okay.
Yeah. So this is from Andrew Prokop. And
thanks, Andrew.
There is the tweet.
Very good. Excellent.
And Cohen has spent 70 hours talking with prosecutors from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And this one is from ABC News, which is reporting the breaking news. So let's look a little bit about Mueller. And we have another old friend here to bring up.
All right.
And that is Marcy Wheeler.
All right.
And once upon a time, David, and this is not to take credit for her work. She did it, not us. But David and I and a bunch of other friends and Marcy used to blog together at this thing called The Next Hurrah. That was back in like 2007.
Yes, Next Hurrah.
So that's where, I mostly met Marcy. That's the platform she used to write her book Anatomy of Deceit, which is about the Scooter Libby extravaganza, travesty.
Okay, yes.
But Marcy is a very solid reporter with an eidetic memory for details. And she has a nice piece in the Huffington Post as a guest writer. Paul Manafort's nonstop lying may have done Robert Mueller a huge favor.
Okay.
Right? After lying to the IRS and lying to banks, and then asking witnesses to lie to the government, Former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort also lied to prosecutors. You know, there's a lot of liars that are associated with Donald Trump. I don't know if you noticed that. Also lied to prosecutors when he was supposed to be cooperating as part of a plea deal. And that's some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. In a status report presented in the former Trump campaign manager's criminal case, Mueller's team asserted, in spite of a plea deal, promising to cooperate truthfully and forthrightly, he didn't. Okay. Monday's status report promises that the special prosecutor's office will substantiate its claim that Manafort violated his plea agreement with a detailed sentencing submission that sets forth the nature of the defendant's crimes and lies, including those after signing the plea agreement herein. So, as part of the normal sentencing process, Mueller will provide details to substantiate his claim that Manafort lied to the prosecution team and possibly evidence of other crimes committed before he entered into the plea agreement. Why is that important? Because we have this guy, Matthew Whitaker, who is now the acting Attorney General.
No, he's not.
And when Mueller's done, he's supposed to submit a report confidentially to Whitaker, and then I guess Whitaker decides whether or not to pass it along to Congress, bury it, or do whatever. And in theory, Matthew Whitaker could make it so that whatever Mueller does, we never find out. In practice, it could be subpoenaed by the Democratic House, but more to the point, if Mueller uses indictments and listings of what people did wrong to spell out what's going on, you don't need the report.
Right. That would be one
thing. And that's the implication of Marcy's piece here.
Okay.
And that's why Manafort lying has actually helped Mueller, because now he has a vehicle to tell the public what's going on.
Yeah, he didn't adhere to the agreement, and so he'll tell the court that, and there's no place for the purported acting Attorney General to intervene.
Right. More information. This comes from The Guardian. And remember, we talked about The Guardian claiming that Stone may have met Assange in London,
right,
where he's holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy. And the dots there are, if Stone or his sidekick, Jerome Corsi, had access to Assange, who had access to the Russians, who hacked information from John Podesta and the DNC, and then Stone passed that information along to Trump, that's a conspiracy, collusion, cooperation story.
We've been waiting for one of those.
And we tried to connect those dots yesterday and say, well, that's why if the Guardian story holds up, it's important. Today, the Guardian says Trump advisor sought WikiLeaks emails via Nigel Farage ally. Mueller document alleges. Ted Malloch was allegedly past request to get advance copies of emails stolen from Trump's opponents by Russian hackers.
Oh.
All right. So an ally of Nigel Farage, who was wound up with the Brexit stuff, was asked to obtain secret information from WikiLeaks for Donald Trump's team during the 2016 election campaign, according to U.S. investigators. The allegation emerged in a draft legal document drawn up by Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor investigating Russia's interference in the 2016 election and any collusion with Trump's campaign team. In response to a series of questions from The Guardian, including whether he had acted on the request to make contact, Malloch said no and no comment.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different things going on here. As Marcy points out, you can get information from Mueller through his indictment publications, and you can also look at the London end of things if you're trying to tie in Julian Assange, and the Brits have their own sources that Trump doesn't necessarily control and can't bully.
Yes.
And the London Guardian people actually are under much tighter libel and other laws there compared to the U.S. So if they're publishing this stuff, you got to think there's some substance behind this. And they're using the draft legal document drawn up by Robert Mueller as the basis for their story.
Oh. Hey, that's our document.
Yeah.
Give that
so,
back,
you know,
British.
it seems like there's a lot that's going to be coming out, and that may help explain why Trump is on a Twitter tirade this morning complaining about the witch hunt.
Oh, well, sure. Although, also...
We don't have to read his tweets, but, just last night he went to bed complaining about it. This morning he's waking up complaining about it.
I mean, anything could explain him raging on Twitter about a witch hunt. Just the fact that he's awake is enough.
So, as the Guardian story says, Trump appeared increasingly anxious on Wednesday following the latest burst of activity from the investigation that has clouded his presidency. He claimed without evidence in a tweet that Mueller's team was viciously telling witnesses to lie about facts in return for favorable treatment. Oh, they spell favorable wrong. I'll have to tell them. The latest revelations came as the role of the former Trump campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, has come under greater scrutiny amid reports in the U.S. that Mueller is looking into his meeting with the Ecuadorian president in 2017. On Tuesday, sources also told The Guardian that Manafort met with Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy. It was Manafort that met with Assange, not Stone, according to The Guardian. A claim denied by both men. Malak, 66, has been under scrutiny by Mueller for months amid suggestions he may have served as an important nexus in 2016 between Trump's White House bid and the campaign to secure Britain's exit from the European Union. No. He was stopped and questioned by the FBI in March upon his arrival at a U.S. airport and said his mobile phone was inspected by investigators. Mueller later subpoenaed him to appear before a grand jury considering the inquiry's findings. Malak, who's American, told the BBC soon after Trump's election win, "I've had a lot of contact. I've been involved with the campaign for over a year and a half." And so there's that story. That seems kind of big to me.
Yes, I think so.
So there's that. There's the Michael Cohen piece that just is going to rile up people even more. I mean, what's happening is that Mueller, obviously, who knows a great deal more than we do, pulls all this together, but separately, there just seems to be other sources besides depending upon Matthew Whitaker to get the information that Mueller puts together out there, be it indictments or court documents explaining moves that Mueller's taken, or how the British press is going to handle this now that Britain seems to be just as involved.
Yeah, well, the British are taking their own path there, just as we read the other day that the British Parliament was exercising what amounts to an analog to our congressional inherent contempt powers, subpoenaing documents from a litigant in some Facebook lawsuits that they thought they would get a hold of some good information from, but they were refusing to turn it over, and they sent the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Commons to go grab these things up. It was pretty interesting.
You have to put that in context with the Republicans blocking a Mueller protection bill from the Senate floor vote.
Yes,
whether that protection bill would actually protect Mueller or not is unclear, but certainly it seems like this stuff's going to come in anyway. It's going to make them look bad, I guess is my point.
Yeah, well, I'm for that.
Now, the politics, this is from Politico. Democrats pressed the case for Trump-Russia collusion. A flurry of new reports, collusion, of course, has scare quotes around it. A flurry of new reports has Democrats calling the case for coordination between the 2016 Trump campaign and the Kremlin stronger than ever, and collusion is back.
Oh, hey, we're back, baby.
At the same time, how does Trump respond? Well, this is the New York Post. Trump threatens to declassify devastating documents about Democrats. In a wide-ranging exclusive interview with the Post, remember Donald's Playhouse interview yesterday,
yes,
which you looked at a little bit, President Trump said Wednesday that if House Democrats launched probes into his administration, which he called presidential harassment, they'd pay a heavy price. If they go down the presidential harassment track, if they want to go and harass the president, I think that would be the best thing that would happen to me. I'm a counterpuncher. I will hit them so hard they've never been hit like that. Because like in politics, nobody's ever tried to, hit the Democrats.
No,
it's never happened before. This will be the first time. We'll have to see if they can take a punch.
Yeah, it'll be pretty interesting. So he's going to selectively declassify documents to do political damage to the opposition party who is taking over the investigative power in the House of Representatives, where impeachment starts. Okay, it's
Okay, but this is where it gets flights of fantasy. The commander-in-chief said he could declassify FISA warrant applications and other documents from Robert Mueller's probe and predicted the disclosure would expose the FBI, the Justice Department, and the Clinton campaign as being in cahoots to set him up. I think he's been watching a little bit too much Judge Jeanine here.
Yeah,
I think that would help my campaign. If they want to play tough, I will do it.
All right.
They will see how devastating these pages are. So he thinks this is a campaign. He thinks he could use FISA warrants, the Justice Department, and the apparatus of the federal government to attack his enemies. But he's not going to do it just yet. Trump told the Post he wanted to save the documents till they were needed.
Oh, yeah, right, sure. Okay, well, that's all fine and dandy. I certainly wouldn't mind seeing some of the documents. I think he's made threats like this before, and he has declassified things, and they tended to actually hurt him more than they helped.
Right.
But, he's
That's one of the reasons nobody took Devin Nunes seriously, even though they took him literally. I mean, you're not supposed to be doing this stuff, and that is itself a shanda. It's a shame. It's a scandal. But, the fact that it turns out never to help him is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
part of the reason, and again, I talked about this a little bit on Twitter, there remains a reluctance, especially in conservative circles, and the Post is one of them, and even neutral media, to consider the fact that Trump is guilty of everything we said he was. And so when you go and approach this, it's well, how does it play? Well, how does it look if he's actually guilty and he's saying this stuff? That's really how you have to approach this. Not, well, he said, and then the other side said, what if he did these things? What if he did these things and he's selectively using the Justice Department, FISA warrants, and other things to make his case? That's bad.
That is bad. Well, I mean, it used to be bad.
That's how we have to look at it.
Do we have to? I mean, can we force that?
It's authoritarian stuff. Well, we can't force the media to take that approach, but we can take that approach.
Okay.
And just because we're partisans doesn't mean we're wrong.
That's true.
You can do it as on the other hand, if you want to add at that.
That's right. It's a both sides story. Yeah, we have to be in the both sides story.
Exactly right.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Just reading in the background here, trying to figure out what exactly Cohen is up to, but I think we got the gist of it, certainly. We'll scour it for details later on, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anyway, the fact that it exists is there. So in my remaining minutes, which I don't have many of, I just want to cover some of the other stuff. You mentioned some of it. But, for example, we have here a little business, the American casualties of Trump's trade war. Tariffs on Chinese imports have endangered small businesses around the United States, a growing nightmare that critics say the president could have avoided. Don't forget, small business is a mainstay of Republican support for the most part. That is to say, the business owners. And then we have Ohio GM workers voted for Trump. Now they want him to step up. And they're talking about the union workers in Ohio about the GM's Lordstown factory closing. And guess what? They're not happy.
They're not. Why is that? They don't have to work.
Because they felt Trump promised he was going to do some magic. He said, don't sell your house because the jobs are coming back.
Ooh, hey, as a financial advisor, that's bad news.
Asked whether he thinks Trump will deliver on his vow to keep the plant open, David Green, president of UAW Local 1112 in Lordstown, was blunt. Your guess is as good as mine. So far, I haven't been real hopeful the president's going to have a desire or an ability to make changes in this area. William Binning, a former Republican Party chairman in Mahoning County and an emeritus political science professor at Youngstown State University, said Trump's reelection bid in Ohio would take a hit if the Lordstown plant closes and nothing replaces it. I don't see politically how he could come back here and face these people and say, vote for me.
You don't see that, though?
Yeah, I see it. He can go back there and say, vote for me.
That's
because,
right.
Hillary Clinton would have closed 9 factories.
Right. Or it didn't close.
Or you're still working. You still have a job.
Right.
You still have a paycheck. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
That's right. You're
you can
rich.
do all of those things.
You're a billionaire. You should vote for me. Yeah, I saw a good tweet dug up, I guess, a quote from Trump last campaign swing through there. Brian Klaas has this quote, and it's quote from start to finish. If I'm elected, you won't lose one plant. You'll have plants coming into this country. You're going to have jobs again. You won't lose one plant. I promise you. I promise you. Whoops. Well, all right. He's a big dumb liar.
Right. This is Armando. Says, if Trump really wanted to save the plants, he would ask GM what it would take to keep them there, which is kind of a good point. Is he negotiating with GM? Is he talking to them? I know he just yelled at them and made their stocks drop, but what's he actually doing?
He's making great deals, I guess. That's what he does.
Anyway, it's an interesting approach, and a lot of people are writing off Ohio as being red and forget about it. But if you have a recession, I wouldn't be so quick about that. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes up that kind of exposes Trump's, it's all talk, no action, and not very good talk at that.
Yeah.
Insulting people isn't necessarily a good policy prescription, is what I'm trying to say.
Good.
Not good. All right. The New York Times has the breaking story. Deutsche Bank offices are searched in money laundering investigation. 170 officers, searched the headquarters of Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt and 5 other sites in the area early Thursday as part of a money laundering investigation involving hundreds of millions of euros, prosecutors said. 2 employees who were not publicly identified but whose ages were given as 50 and 46 and other unidentified people in positions of authority are suspected of failing to report possible money laundering for transaction worth more than $350 million. This flowed to organizations in the British Virgin Islands. Before spring 2016, the German bank confirmed in a statement the police were investigating several of its offices in Germany and said the investigation related to the Panama Papers, which was a trove of files that put a spotlight on global money laundering. Yes. We are cooperating fully with the authorities, which is expected.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's what a bank would say.
What does it mean? I don't know. We'll see. So that's what's going on with Deutsche Bank, and that was breaking. There's a lot of business news, not a lot of it not so good for Donald Trump. So he's getting hammered on a lot of different fronts. Business isn't necessarily going his way. The Fed isn't cooperating and doing what he wants by keeping interest rates low. They seem to be, dare I say it, independent, and he hates that. Politics isn't necessarily going his way. He just got clobbered in an election. The difference between the Democratic vote and the Republican vote was historically high. Of course, the country's bigger than it used to be, but it's the biggest margin ever. And we got the new class coming in, and Nancy Pelosi won her Speaker caucus nomination, I guess is what you call it. And then the actual vote will be, January 3rd?
Yes, that'll be the floor vote.
And so a lot of this, and then we have all of this Mueller stuff from England and from the U.S. coming up. So it's really not been a good week for Donald. And when he's under pressure, he lashes out and does stuff. And so it'll be interesting to see.
Yes.
Now, is Mueller's job safe? I don't think so. But what he'll do about it remains to be seen.
Okay. Let's find out.
Right. I'm just going to give you one follow-up thing here, and this is a query I put out to a Republican I know in Virginia named Brian Schoeneman.
Okay.
Now, Brian, a few years back, was involved in a very close recount, and he was one of those fair-minded Republicans who was very transparent about everything that was happening in the recount, was on Twitter talking about this is what we do, this is the time we're going to meet, this is how it works, this is the process. It was great. And I'm not endorsing him for president, but I asked him, I sent the Washington Post story about what's going on in North Carolina 9.
Yeah.
And said, as a good faith expert, what do you make of this? And he said, it's interesting. I'm reading from his tweet that he just sent back. It doesn't seem to indicate there were votes stolen, just folks filling out forms they didn't need to. It's odd. It's common for aggressive campaigns to do a lot of absentee ballot chase like this, but not with large numbers of folks not returning ballots. So there's something to be investigated there. Something's not quite right. So I just leave you with that. And, of course, as we get more, we'll report on it.
Okay. That's going to be a very interesting one.
Yeah. And, it's going to be a process story. It's going to be a politics story. It's going to be maybe even a criminal investigation story. Who knows? We'll see. But that's our wrap-up for today, and looks like there'll be more coming down, I would think, from the Mueller stuff. If not today, then tomorrow.
I think
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. We've been blogging together for like over a decade.
Yeah.
Along with Armando and Joan and other friends of the show, as we talked about. Keep an eye on Marcy, though. She's got a pretty good eye for what's going on with the big picture Mueller stuff.
Right.
And we'll be back, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay. I think that sounds like a good plan. I'll try and come back. All right. Well, by the way, I'll tip you off on this one. Yes. John Dean is tweeting with respect to Trump's latest threat, pointing out this is a pure bluff by Trump and shows how he doesn't understand that he can't declassify, for example, although you never know what it means, but he can't declassify, for example, grand jury testimony or court-sealed documents. So apparently that numbered among the threats of things that he would declassify, things that are not necessarily in his power to declassify, though I suppose he could try and arrange anything and force people into doing things that they're not supposed to be able to do, and then, whoops, they're done. And now what are we going to do? So I don't know whether that really... I don't know what it makes any sense to discuss what the rules are when it comes to Trump.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think the Senate has been as compliant as the House has been. But then again, they're still a lame duck. And Devin Nunes is still chair until you get the new Congress.
Right.
So what his committee can subpoena and then leak, I don't know.
True also. And he's been willing to do that.
And he has been willing to do that. I just wonder if he's going to turn that up in the week or two he has left. They don't have that much time.
Yeah. I don't know.
Everybody breaks for the holidays, and it's already almost December.
And Trump's almost ready to go back to Mar-a-Lago anyway.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So we'll see. Exactly right. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right. Thanks very much. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay. Very good. All right. Here we go. Let's see. A couple other things to follow up on. We're just going to have to grasp at every little thing that comes across the transom at this point. There's just too much going on here. Let's see. First of all, Michael Musson explains how they'll resolve the Ohio issue. Trump asked GM if they were closing plants, and GM denied it very forcefully. So it wasn't that he was lying. It was just, that's what they told me. What am I going to do? They give me a lot of money. What should I do? Not like them? I don't think so. All right. Many, many things happening. Trying to decide as we speak where we'll go with this one. Should I just, can I take a look at this? Is this brand new happening right now? Yeah. Get a little information on the Michael Cohen bit here. Why Boing Boing should be my source for this, I don't know, but what the hell? Let's try it. It's fun. Michael Cohen pleads guilty to lying to Congress. Okay, so we had that right. About Russia Trump real estate project. I'm curious, does he make any explanation as to why he lied? I mean, we can all guess why he lied. I'm just wondering whether they just say that outright here. This is Boing Boing's chief here, right? Zenny Jardine. How does she say it? I don't know. But anyway, she's one of the top folks, if not the top person, as I think, right? At Boing Boing, doesn't she run the place? Anyway, it's getting hot in here. Donald Trump's former personal attorney, maybe, Michael Cohen, has secured a new plea deal with Robert Mueller. Cohen is in court today pleading guilty, like for the second time, right, for lying to Congress in the Trump-Russia investigation. New in today's reporting, CNN reports that, she's doing a good roundup here, CNN's got this one. According to the info being read out, Cohen made a false statement regarding Trump Tower deal in Moscow that he was working on in 2015 and 16. He had discussion about the project even later. Okay. That's what, okay. I thought I saw some other commentary about that one. Cohen previously said the deal was stopped in January 2016. ABC News earlier this morning has this bit. Cohen is scheduled to appear in federal court in Manhattan Thursday. That's right now, of course. Expected to enter this guilty plea for misstatements to Congress. Misstatements. In closed-door testimony last year about his contacts with Russians during the campaign. Once among the president's most loyal and zealous defenders in business and politics, Cohen has now promised to, quote, put family and country first, what do you know, by cooperating with prosecutors, becoming perhaps the most pivotal public witness against his former boss, yada, yada. Cohen's earlier plea deal with federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York implicated President Trump in campaign finance felonies. Since then, the 70 hours of interviews that were mentioned earlier, the questioning is focused on contacts with Russians by Trump associates during the campaign, Trump's business ties to Russia. I have no business ties to Russia. You remember that. Obstruction of justice and, that's a good one, talk of possible pardons. Sources familiar with the discussions have told ABC News. Renato Mariotti tweeting here and getting included in this story. This was solely a real estate deal and nothing more. Was that the lie? If so, what more was there to the deal? That's interesting. All right. So that's a good question. And here's a question, another embedded tweet. Will we finally learn whether Michael Cohen has ever been to Prague? I thought that had actually been established since his claims that they actually did have evidence of him in being in Prague. But let's find out. So what else? Any of these other embedded tweets give me anything to go on here? But reference to the Deutsche Bank thing here. And Brian Schatz, senator from Hawaii, tweeting, no person holding any office of profit or trust under the United States shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present emolument, office, or title, or of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state. The emoluments clause, the foreign emoluments clause. Not that Schatz alone, or even all Democrats by themselves, are able to do anything about that, but a good reminder of where we stand. Okay, let's see. Other issues percolating that deserve time. I have a few here that don't deserve time. That's definitely true. Where we are. Okay, let's see. And where are we time-wise? 9:44. Okay, let's try this. Let's go back to the top of the show to the caucus elections. Nancy Pelosi winning with a significant margin, a tremendous margin, and great catch there by David. I had that one tucked away too, that they just crap on her result and laud Paul Ryan's results, though, of course, he was considerably less effective than she was, and he had the Senate on his side too, and so he also managed, or somehow put together a worse margin inside of his own conference. But anyway, Pelosi appears to have won the nomination rights. So the question of whether or not there will be votes on the floor, I guess basically the reporters were trying to keep the controversy going by saying 30-something votes against Pelosi, for lack of a better term. They would have been voting for people inside the conference. It's not a yes-no thing, I don't think, inside the conference. So I guess if 30-something people voted for someone else, what they were trying to do is say, oh, well, those people who voted for someone else inside of the caucus will be consistent and on the floor vote for someone else as well. And that's not necessarily the case. This is to be thought of as a primary, and having lost in whatever bids, such as they might have been, to replace her as the Democratic nominee for Speaker of the House, most Democrats will, in the end, say that's what we'll do. We will maintain control of the House by voting for the person who won the nomination, Nancy Pelosi. Though I guess there's, anything can happen. So I guess that's what they were latching onto and saying, well, they only need 17 members to vote for someone else to deny her a majority outright. And here 30-something, 34, was that the number, have done it. And so, half that number, if half of them come back, it's still a problem. So I guess that's what they're clinging to continue with the issue. Steny Hoyer, also nominated again, and because the majority leader position is simply decided, it's not a constitutional position, it's a caucus position, and so that's decided. They're done with that. And by the way, he was reelected by acclamation. There was it was basically a unanimous consent analog. So he'll be back. No change there. Clyburn returns as well. The number 4 post was open because Joe Crowley, who previously occupied the position of Democratic caucus chair, the person who runs the meetings, lots of things happen in there. But for instance, yesterday what was happening is these elections. He would have been in charge of running that meeting, and he runs all their policy meetings when they get together and discuss strategy and policy. Except he won't be doing that anymore because he lost in the primary to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And you know how it is when you lose in a primary in the Democratic Party, right? Everyone gets behind the nominee because that's what parties are about. Anyway, he's gone, and they needed a new caucus chair. Now, Armando would like, we'll give you the green light there if he wanted to talk about freshmen joining the Blue Dog Caucus. It's sort of an important development. We'll check in on that as well. Though there are other subjects, to be sure. So maybe we'll keep a lid on how long we'll spend on the internal caucus stuff and get to the external things like constitutional crises. But okay, so there was a contest for caucus chair. And the main contestants, and maybe the only two contestants, the only people I saw talked about were Barbara Lee of California, who is deservedly a big liberal progressive hero, and Hakeem Jeffries, who is, I don't think, generally considered a progressive hero of any kind, but is another of our Democratic up-and-comers who wanted to move into leadership and did. So that was the contest. Hakeem Jeffries is what, in his third term, perhaps? I better look that up. He's relatively new. Barbara Lee has been there since forever, and I think probably the thing that comes to mind most quickly with Barbara Lee is her sole dissenting vote, or her vote was the sole dissent in the authorization for use of military force. So, okay, Armando tells me he's in his 4th term. Hakeem Jeffries, I've lost track because I don't care anymore. How's that? But yeah, it's difficult to keep track of all these guys. Barbara Lee has been there since the 80s, I'm guessing. Let's see. But anyway, she's well regarded, revered, really, among a certain part of the caucus for that dissenting vote, the one and only vote against the authorization for use of military forces, prescient, of course, because the AUMF was even then a piece of garbage that's been used improperly for everything else. Lee has been in since 1998, which is not really forever, but in political terms these days, it feels like it. So basically, here's what I wanted to say about that one. Normally what we say is you can predict the outcome of these races by looking at the amount of money spent from out of the leadership PACs affiliated with the contestants. And that the quick and dirty estimate, if you have to do it on the fly, is just show me the amount of money that they have dispersed to other candidates. And we'll say, like, over the lifetime of the leadership PAC. which whenever there's an election going on where there's a question about, usually doesn't involve looking at more than 6 to 8 years worth of donations, but it can become tedious. And so your initial glance at how those numbers run, and we can look them up while we're working on it. Let's see. Barbara Lee's leadership PAC is One Voice. One Voice PAC is the name of her leadership PAC, and she's been running it for quite some time. She's been using it to collect and distribute campaign funds to other Democrats since the 2006 election cycle. So somewhere in the neighborhood of, so beginning in 2005, early 2005, taking in money, dispersing it, in the hopes of building a following in the caucus for elevating her to leadership. That's what they're about. I mean, it's not leadership PACs. They're not called leadership PACs because people in leadership have them. They do, but there is a real answer to chicken and egg here. They are called leadership PACs because they are used by people hoping to leverage the distribution of campaign funds, excess campaign funds, in many cases, to other members to get them to support them for moves into leadership. Now, Hakeem Jeffries has got one too, and he's only been around for, 4 terms? Hakeem Jeffries, let's look it up while we're going along. Leadership PAC. His leadership PAC is, where are we? Jobs, Education, and Families First PAC. The PAC names tend to be a little, doofy sounding. Occasionally you get people who try to spell out their own name, with an acronym. Anyway, these are not terrible as these things go. One Voice PAC, Barbara Lee. Jobs, Education, and Families First. I love Jobs and Education and Families. I'd put them first too. That's Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries has only been operative in this game since 2016, the 2016 election cycle. And it was pretty anemic in 2016, rather robust in 2018. And so you could perhaps handicap things by saying, all right, well, lifetime, it certainly looks like Barbara Lee has given out considerably more money for a considerably longer amount of time. So the quick and dirty estimation is Barbara Lee wins that seat. Spoiler alert, she did not win that seat. Hakeem Jeffries did. So what happened to the analysis, right? Does it fail? Is this the first time that it's failed? And what does it mean that it failed? Because I've always held out to you that the money is the best predictor. I don't know that it's necessarily the determining factor in the minds of, like, when decisions are made. Like, I don't really care who occupies this otherwise important position. After all, it'll have some policy implications. I don't care about their ideology. I only care whether they gave me money or not. That's awfully hard to imagine every member of the caucus using as their decision-making mechanism. So I have only offered it as a predictive measure. But I do think that there are some people who do that. There are certainly members who say, as between these two, I don't care, and I like the one that likes me. Like Donald Trump terms. I like the one that gives me money. But I don't know that I really believe that's how all the votes are cast. But it is the best predictor, and that's all. And I believe I'm perfectly fine with the idea of making these contests ideological. Maybe they should be. It might be a good idea. And a lot of people who wish they were ideological are often very angry with me for pointing out that, well, this may not be why they're making this decision, but money seems to determine the outcome with almost 100% accuracy. But what about this, right? If it was not the money and it was ideology, should we be worried about the direction that the conference or the caucus is taking, given that Barbara Lee, who's like the big progressive hero, didn't win, versus Hakeem Jeffries? And she's a woman, and wouldn't it be great to have more women in high-ranking leadership? That's something. At least they're both people of color. You could cling to that if you wanted to. Armando wants to chime in on this one, and we'll let you do it. But let me get through the rest of this quickie.
No, you
quick
finished that, but I
analysis
do
here.
have a comment on Jeffries versus Lee.
Okay, well then we can figure out the ideology later. But anyway, so you might say, all right.
I think that factored in. I do think that factored in.
I think it has to. I mean, I cling to the model only because it works as a predictive model. I don't like it, and I wouldn't want to cast my vote that way. Anyway, so, but here, what happened? Lee has given out more money for more years than Hakeem Jeffries by far. Why didn't she win if the money is the predictor? Well, okay, that's the quick and dirty predictor. If you have to do it on the fly, just look at the numbers. But it doesn't make any sense to have that be the end of it. For instance, what if you gave out $100 million all to people who lost their races? Would you be able to expect that you should win?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. So I did a little looking, and guess what? First of all, you might decide to handicap by weighting the most recent money most heavily. That's possible. So in the 2018 election cycle, for instance, this one here, Hakeem Jeffries' PAC dispersed about, it looks like in the neighborhood of $220,000, and pretty much the same. Actually less than half that, as it now appears, $100,000 from Barbara Lee. But like we said, over the lifetime of the PAC, she's given out considerably more money. But I actually went and looked at the recipients, and I marked down how many of the people that she's given money to versus the people that Jeffries has given money to are now present in the caucus to cast a vote. And the answer is, this time around, Barbara Lee supported 14 members who were there to cast a vote. Hakeem Jeffries supported 17. Okay, that's pretty close. But 3 of them are on both lists, and Jeffries doubled his money to those versus Lee. So at net, she has 11 and he had 20. I thought that was pretty interesting. We'll continue with it after the break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Armando joining us for more of the discussion. And we talked a little bit in the background. I think, all right, well, I'll let you go where you're going. You were going to mention.
Okay. Let me actually connect this Blue Dog thing to the story.
Okay.
All right, because I think it's relevant. I think I sent you the link. I think it's 7 new members of the Blue Dog Caucus, freshmen.
Okay.
Right? Now, we talked about this the other day about freshmen being joiners, but why would you join the Blue Dog Caucus? What are you trying to say?
Famous.
Well, it's infamous now.
Yes.
With Democrats.
It's
not
true.
Ben McAdams in Utah, I guess, maybe a couple of others are the type of districts where maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. But you can't tell me that it actually makes much sense for most, because it's a dirty word for people who actually know what the Blue Dog Caucus is. You telling me a swing voter in a Republican district knows what the Blue Dog Caucus is? I don't buy it. It's maybe an audience of media for the media type thing. The show, look at me, I'm a Blue Dog. But, in terms of fundraising and grassroots organizing and online fundraising, it's negative. I had this dispute with Bill Sherry yesterday, and I was like, tell me what's the political upside to joining the Blue Dog Caucus at this point for most. And I don't think there is any. Now, let me get you back to how that connects to Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee is a strong progressive voice. You say, a lot of people admire her for voting against, say, UMF.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And she got 113 votes in this now. It wasn't a wipeout. She lost by 10 votes. It was very close.
The money
she
would
swings
have
5
told you
votes
that.
and she wins.
Yes.
I
hope it wasn't 3 of them here. Like I said, if anybody knows how, I'd be curious to know how Tom Malinowski, Joe Morell, and Stephanie Murphy voted.
Well, I'm sure Murphy voted for Jeffries. Spanberger. The 7 who joined the Blue Dog Caucus almost certainly voted for Jeffries, and one of the reasons is that vote on the AUMF. And Lee has taken fairly leftish and, in my view, wrong-headed positions on Venezuela and Cuba and certain things like that. She's toned it down a lot. This was a long time ago. Remember, she inherited Ron Dellums' seat. Yeah. She was a longtime staffer for Ron Dellums, who Ron Dellums, and people of the younger generation won't remember, but he was, very, in a time when there weren't that many, he was very, for the Sandinistas and stuff like that, which I'm totally against, but Ron Dellums was a great man. I mean, just because he was really wrong on these things, because he didn't know about them in the way I think he should have, doesn't mean he wasn't great. And Barbara Lee, when you take the total picture, is one of the great congresswomen in terms of her positions. I mean, in my view, and I disagree with a lot of them, but you put her in the leadership position and you say, look, I'm telling you, Barbara Lee, and I would have been fine with it because they're going to do it to Hakeem Jeffries, so it doesn't matter. But Hakeem Jeffries is more, he worked at Paul Weiss. I don't know if you've seen him on TV. He's very effective. He hasn't taken. He didn't vote against the AUMF, and he hasn't taken positions that are viewed as way left. Okay, but he actually is way left. But he doesn't on those.
Maybe that's good.
Those signaling votes. That isn't how he portrays himself. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that ideology, at least as perceived in the media and things like that, is why Jeffries was able to squeak by. I also think that he probably split the Congressional Black Caucus vote. Yeah, I don't know that any other candidate would have been able to split the Congressional Black Caucus vote, and Lee would have won. She perceived him as soon as he joined in the race as a major threat, and she ran hard against him, and I wish she would have won. I really do think that would have been an important face to have in leadership, not just because she's an African-American woman, but because of her ideology. Yeah, I think one of the things that I think about the Democratic Party, that people on both sides are always trying to stamp out one side or the other, but by necessity, we have to be a bigger tent, and not become Republican-like in that. And then, of course, I want to go to a vote, and this is where I have huge problems with the problem solvers and the Seth Moultons of the world. Yes. When you lose in the party, you say, congratulations, I support you.
Yes, Barbara Lee did.
As Barbara Lee did. Congratulations, I support you. Because that's how a political party has to work. And then the next time you take another shot, maybe you win, and they have to say, congratulations, I support you.
Yes. They're supposed to.
They're supposed to. So that's the biggest problem I have. They want all of it. And they obviously not going to get anything of it. It seems to me. I think you're down to 3 no votes against Pelosi in January. Myself, you notice how it all just went quiet today. Yeah, Kathleen Rice made a ridiculous statement, and off we go. But I mean, money obviously has a lot to do with these votes. There's no question. Steny Hoyer gets voted by acclamation. Why? Steny Hoyer, of all people, who, by the way, is extremely to the right of his district. Yes. His voting. His ideology is out of step with his district, and frankly, it's out of step with the Democratic Party. There are so many good reasons why Steny Hoyer should not be the majority leader. He doesn't represent a significant constituency anymore. Except, what does Steny Hoyer do? He raises tons of money that he hands out.
Yes. And I gotta say, I mean, it's a very weird thing, and I'm not really sure how to classify it, except to simply say you really have to. It has to be like content neutral. When I say I don't know why the money, I do know why the money predicts it, but and it shouldn't, and that's not what people are doing. But I don't know. I can't tell you exactly why it predicts things, because I'm sure, like you say, people vote, if not ideologically, then certainly strategically, and say, I think this is the person we should have out front. I don't necessarily agree with them all the time. And yet the money in total predicts what's going to happen. It doesn't necessarily predict individual votes. I mean, I can, just because you mentioned Kathleen Rice, I can tell you that the only one of the two candidates to donate to Rice was Lee in 2016.
I would be shocked if she voted for Lee for the leadership position.
Very shocked. And I like you said, like with Murphy, I doubt very much. It's the damnedest thing. I would bet that it's probably a terrible predictor of the individual votes.
Yes.
But is the almost perfect predictor of the aggregate votes, and I'm not sure why that is.
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at it. Lee, I'm sure, helped other people with this idea in mind. Certainly since Crowley lost, and everybody knew that fairly important position was coming open. Yes. Remember, the top three are in their 70s. There's going to be a new Speaker of the House that's a Democrat, in 10 years or something, no matter what. And the person most primed to do it will be a younger generation purpose. I mean, I think Steny Hoyer's chance to be Speaker is, unless,
the Prince Charles
Pelosi leaves immediately, is not going to happen. Same with Clyburn.
You go and hang out with Prince Charles.
Right. Well, Hakeem Jeffries is now positioned to be the front runner to be the next person to be Speaker of the House that's a Democrat after Nancy Pelosi. So it was an important election, and I think that might have also gotten these people some of the willies because of Barbara Lee's, sometimes symbolic positions that they don't like. It's, oh, well, look, she'll become, whatever, Oakland's, whatever. I don't know if people take Oakland. I'd probably still call her San Francisco, even though she's from Oakland. And I think ideology actually determined that. I think Jeffries did enough in terms of money so he could count on support. And crucially, as a tactic, I'm sure he was able to pick off a lot of CBC votes, particularly in New York, and in the North possibly, and in the East. It would be great to get a roll call so we could actually sort of figure all that out.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what happened. It became a race bigger than it was. Indeed, Jeffries didn't jump in till, the last couple months into the race. He was like 4 or 5 months after Lee. And I'm sure he had it on his mind, but I'm fairly sure some people said you should run because you're the guy who can beat her, and we don't want her to be in the leadership.
Could be.
This is all speculation on my part. I have done no reporting on it. I'm just telling you how I read it.
Yeah. Well, it makes a certain amount of sense. I thought also very interesting was you brought up the fact that Lee, too, is in her 70s. So it was really interesting to watch the dynamic.
66, but she's old. Older.
Yeah. Oh, I thought she actually was.
No, she's 66.
Oh. All right. Well, but having watched.
Think, what? I could be wrong. I'm maybe thinking of Marcia Fudge. Fudge is 66, so you know what? I should double check.
Well, in that case, we'll check it out. And let's see. Well, we'll do the Barbara Lee. Should we trust Wikipedia? Why not?
I think they're right on the ages. They were right on when
72.
Oh, so you were right and I was wrong. I was thinking Marcia Fudge. So
okay.
My apologies to the audience.
Congratulations for knowing how old Marcia Fudge is offhand. That's good.
It became a thing to me when Marcia Fudge was talking about being a speaker and we need new young leaders. And like, well, she's 66. I guess that's younger than 78, but it's not exactly turning the page.
Right. Neither would 72 be turning the page. I thought it was very interesting that, the voices for there were, of course, two factions saying we need new, younger leadership. There was a right faction and a left faction. And the left faction, since when the question was Pelosi, has since come around to saying, all right, to hell with that. We don't need that right now. The right faction never gave up on it yet. Meanwhile, so maybe now they're happy at having Hakeem Jeffries. But for the left faction that wanted younger people, but then found themselves voting for Lee, because she has, after all, a very good record and voting ideologically, but then tossing aside the we need a younger, fresher face thing in there, and then the younger, fresher face won, and they're mad about that. They're mad on the internet about that, and then of course it became it didn't work because she's a woman and he's a man, and the man always wins, and I don't know whether that was it or not.
It certainly was a bad look for us as a party that the man beat the woman for this race.
Yeah. So that was unfortunate, but the money predictor wins out again. I mean, I guess I went ahead and I did this look. So if you just to consider the 2018 things, I mean, again, this really shouldn't tell you that much. 11 votes and 20 votes, even totaled, that's not a very big chunk of the caucus. So that won't tell you much either. But then I figured, all right, well, she's been around since 2012, since she's been giving money.
Probably. So you went back to 2012 because she's obviously been in Congress since '98.
Yeah.
Who knows how much she was giving out then.
Leadership PAC history was all I was looking at. But she also just happens to have terrible luck, I guess, although then you start to think of it, well, maybe it's not luck. Okay, she's not picking winners. She's spending a lot of money, and they're not showing up in Congress. And that could either mean a couple of things, but one of the things it could mean is maybe her instincts aren't nearly as good. Or maybe her instincts are, in fact, ideological, and those people aren't winning. But she also
it'd be the latter, in my view. She probably gave some progressive long shots a shot in a few races that they couldn't win.
So, Jeffries spent his money. He picked some losers. I don't know if we want to say that about people, but people who lost
an election.
But in many cases, they were similar to Lee's picks. But the 2016 cycle was like a straight disaster in terms of placing people in the caucus that would, if they voted on the basis of money, would be there for Lee. I mean, her picks across the board, of the people she picked that actually won and are still in Congress, or still in the House anyway, even there, a couple of those people ended up getting more money from Jeffries the following, twice as much from Jeffries the following cycle. I'm looking at, let's see, how many people are on this list? Like 35 people that she gave money to in 2016. I don't think 10 of them are in Congress.
Oh.
I mean, but that's like, we're talking about $100,000 down the tubes.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but she's doing the things that you would want a progressive hero to do, to say, hey, they're a long shot. They might not win, but I believe in them and I want them here. I'm going to put money into that. And then the money goes away. And it's sort of sad because, if the money predictor is real, and I still, it works, but I don't know why, then you could test the hypothesis by saying, all right, well, we're going to pick a progressive leader and we're going to fill up that leadership pack, fill it with small dollar donors if you want, if you can, and say, you have a 6 to 10 year program of handing out money. It could be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez if you want. Why not? She can raise money. Hand that money out.
On her part, that would be smart.
Yeah, and see what goes on. See what you can do with the money, and
because she can raise it from small dollars. She could. I'm sure she could get $10 million to hand out for the next election. And
it's sad. People don't like to say, money in politics, etc. You shouldn't rely on things that way. But if it's small dollar money, what do you that's a good thing. And what could be better than saying, I'm investing in the caucus I want to see in the next 10 years?
Right. And I think that's an interesting point. One of the attacks that was going against Jeffries from Bernie's former digital fundraiser and now at The Intercept is, Hakeem Jeffries only got 2% of his money from small dollar donors. Mm-hmm. And the problem was Barbara Lee, who does rely more on small dollar donors, but was never one of those, darlings. Unfortunately, she's more of an old school progressive.
Yeah.
only got like 20% from small dollar donors, which, okay, well, 80% of large dollar. It was silly. Beyond that, both of them are in districts that they can't lose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're fine. They're terrific. I love them, but neither one of them has been in a tough race and a tough contest ever. So you can't really say, oh, well, look, they're beholden to their donors. They're really not. They're beholden whenever they was when they first got there. Now they're beholden to nobody. I mean, no one's going to knock them out, I don't think. I don't think they can be primaried and beaten in their districts. So, who are they beholden to? The fact is, only if they're looking for other things. Hakeem Jeffries is someone who can be speaker if he wants to stay in the House, or who can run for statewide office in New York. He's a rising star. Barbara Lee's 72. Her life's in the House. This was why, in many ways, I think even more reason why Barbara Lee should have been the choice. But be that as it may, we are where we are.
Well, it is an interesting thing to think about. I mean, you could certainly run that experiment and say, let's see if the money predictor works if we consciously make it your
Well, it works
choice.
for Steny Hoyer. Come on.
Yeah.
What other reason is there to vote for Steny Hoyer?
I don't really know. And, that seems to have worked. And so, I believe it can. It would be a great experiment to do. But, I guess, I don't know. For some reason, it made a lot of people very upset yesterday when I was discussing with people. They were mad about Barbara Lee having lost, but I didn't want it to degenerate
into. I can't
into.
say I'm mad. I mean, it's not like they picked
it wasn't you,
Seth Moulton or something like that.
But I felt like they were going to let this slide back into, well, it's all rigged again. Oh, let's not talk about it. I mean, it is rigged, but the thing is, you could rig it. Get some money.
It's not rigged in the sense that everybody had one vote and they voted.
Yeah.
Why they voted, well, that's
right.
What you got to figure out.
Well,
and it was very close.
That would be the key to
10
it.
votes. I mean, it was a super close race.
And the money told you that it should have been.
One point I wanted to make was, Barbara Lee probably was hurt by the size of the wave.
Yes.
There are probably 5 or 6 votes that came in against her from that wave.
That's true. That might not otherwise have made it in a marginal district.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. But she had much better luck this time, and I think that the wave had to do with that too. Like the 2016 election wasn't particularly good for Democrats, generally speaking, and so she also did poorly. And then wave year, everybody did well. You bet on the Democrat, you win a lot.
Yeah, you just, we won, 55% of the races or whatever.
But, the money thing is a big deal. And it also it explains why our leadership tends to be less than boldly progressive all the time, in that you got to you got to be a fundraiser.
A leader of, there was actually a pretty interesting piece. Well, it was silly, and yet to me it raised some interesting questions by Matt Iglesias at Vox about Pelosi. And, he said, yes, she's a fantastic Speaker of the House for just about everything except one thing. She's not great on TV, which I happen to agree with. I don't think she's great on TV.
Okay.
And not because she's a woman. She just doesn't, she doesn't have, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
she's not
I don't know
punchy. She's not a soundbite person. She's a serious person who thinks seriously about things. And Dick Gephardt was terrible on TV, and he was a leader. And my God, Tom Foley, forgot about Tip, was a caricature. Tip O'Neill.
Yes.
Right. So it's not like
Speaker isn't necessarily a great TV person ever. Even Paul Ryan.
They never really
thought he was
TV
a genius.
people. I mean, who really knew about what the? Think about it in the history.
Denny Hastert was awesome on TV.
Obviously not.
Some shambling
Boehner
mound.
Really wasn't.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the longest
Paul Ryan, they
Republican
loved him.
speaker.
He's look how good he did. So how important that was, anyways, is up the question. But if you cared about that stuff, this is I'm going to lead you to a discussion that I'd actually would love to hear from you, and I'll probably hang up and listen as a first-time caller. Is committee chairman and the fact that when you hold the House, the committee chairman become much more important TV personalities. and frankly, much more important. And since you worked for years in that and have followed it so closely, what is the power that a committee chairman has in the House to A, drive an agenda, B, get bills to the floor, C, get on TV and make cases? Because look at there's two chairmen that I know of that I think are very good on TV, and I think very good chairmen and very good congressmen. Adam Schiff, of course, that people probably know by now because he was going up against Nunes, and Elijah Cummings. Mm-hmm. Jerry Nadler's an incredibly smart guy, and I think will be a terrific committee chairman on the Judiciary Committee. I'm not sure he's mastered the television thing yet.
Yeah, maybe not.
What else? The appropriations. We were talking about Murtha the other day, and you talked about how important the power of Murtha willed as the Appropriations Committee chairman.
Right.
And my understanding is that we're going to have an African-American woman who's going to be head of the Appropriations Committee. I'm not sure who. I don't know. Someone just mentioned it, and they didn't say the name. And I'm like, who's that going to be?
Well, let's look.
Isn't that going to be a pretty important person?
Yes. Ways and Means or Appropriations? I mean, they're both important, but yes, okay.
Who's going to be chairman of Ways and Means?
Let's go see. I don't know. Well, let's go look up who is the ranking member now.
I mean, it'd be hard to bypass the ranking member, right?
Typically, yes. Unless
there's a power play involved and they were on the wrong side.
Yeah. I mean, it does sometimes happen. Let's see. The current ranking member of Appropriations is Nita Lowey. But
excuse me, as a woman, not an African American. Yes, Nita Lowey, who, by the way, is probably going to retire from Congress pretty soon, or probably maybe not as soon as she would have if we had won this election.
Although I'm looking at the old things here, and so I'm careful. I don't really know necessarily who did and didn't retire already.
Well, Nita did not. They've been talking about. She's talked about there's been talk about her retiring for years. By the way, to start a new controversy, the rumor mill is, Chelsea Clinton would run for her seat.
Oh, okay.
Fun, now, right?
The current the pecking order, the seniority order in which they're listed, and I think they're listed in seniority order here. Usually, what happens with the Democrats on the Appropriations Committee is interesting. Nita Lowey, Marcy Kaptur would be a real problematic. I mean, I kind of like her in some ways, but not, I don't want her setting agendas. You don't have to
apologize to me. I'm not a big Marcy Kaptur fan. I don't like her on trade, and obviously she was pretty bad on choice for a lot of years until I think she revised herself like Tim Ryan did. Ohio's weird that way, but anyway.
Lowey, Kaptur, Pete Visklosky is the third ranking. Peter Visklosky from Indiana.
I don't know who he is.
And Jose Serrano is the fourth ranking Democrat. And it's like, you know what? I don't think I would put him in charge.
I mean, I'm not thrilled with that.
Rosa DeLauro right behind him. Rosa DeLauro.
Okay.
So I'm okay with her. I
like Rosa DeLauro.
Yeah, I don't think we'll go any further than 5 in terms of the ranking. They'll be taking over some subcommittees.
From that group, presumably, there's nobody that unless Pelosi has something in mind there. I don't know.
Subcommittee chairs. I mean, those 5 probably would hold subcommittee chairs in appropriations. So that's something all by itself. We're going to start thinking about that, and those decisions are not always made strictly on the basis of seniority, though they do like to stick to that. But then the caucus will make those decisions.
I remember there being some move-arounds and whatnot. I'm not going to tell you how you run your show, but I know we're getting close to the break. I think it would be nice for all of us to remind ourselves of, because now that we have the committees, how they function in the House and how they lead to things, or is it more of a top-down operation than we're led to believe? Does the speaker and the leader sort of tell them, okay, do a bill about this, and then they go and do a bill about this, or do they come up and percolate their own bills? Interestingly, if you think about what the problem solvers caucuses are talking about, this is their theory of what's wrong. Hey, we get shut out and we don't get to move things, and our voices aren't being heard. We need to democratize, small d, the House. is this what they're talking about? The fact is, that's not what they're talking about, in my view, because if they were, they would have made an articulate case. This was all grandstanding. I mean, this is what. By the way, they ended up making a deal. I
Yes.
send you the link. I don't remember what the rules changes are, but I think they're all pretty cosmetic.
Well, we'll take a look at them. Maybe we can do that with our time on Friday. But yeah, well, I can speak to that certainly after the break in terms of the committee powers. But yeah, committee chairs pretty much still drive the agenda there, but they do get suggestions all the time from the top, and don't always take them.
They don't have to take them.
Right.
That's funny.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on at Roots Radio. And so I'm pondering things over the break, and I don't know that I have much in the way of prepared material to actually answer the question of how much power committees have. It's just sort of, it's something you got to feel your way through. I mean, committees still awfully powerful, and committee chairs, of course, have a tremendous amount of discretion about which bills which make their way to their committee they're going to spend time on. And, it's really, I mean, it's up to their discretion, essentially. They just, they have the power more or less unilaterally to schedule hearings, which is still the typical way that a bill makes its way from, the hopper to the floor. By the way, committee chairs also often weigh in on the question of whether or not a bill will come to their committee. If they want it, and they can make the case that their committee ought to have jurisdiction if it's not entirely clear, or they can make the case that they shouldn't have jurisdiction if they don't want it anywhere near them. So even the question of whether or not a bill lands on their lap is one that they can weigh in on. Once it gets there, if it's something they favor or are very interested in, schedule hearings for it early. And once sometimes they have to give in to their constituent membership also. I mean, they too are leaders and elected to a certain extent. The caucus and the Republican conference both internally have mechanisms whereby they can, in fact, hold votes on whether or not whether a particular member ought to be entrusted with the chairmanship. And they technically are the ones deciding which members will be on the committee and how many and in what order of seniority. Once they set it in motion and people are on committees, they tend to return to them, and the conference and caucus are both, generally speaking, loath to disrupt that. But it can happen if you make some sort of egregious violation against party discipline, they will disrupt those things. And sometimes members with equal seniority status, both as members of the House and even on the committee, will contest the chairmanship between them. That happens too. So anyway, so it's a significant amount of power that goes along with the position, and the committee chairs similarly work along with the rest of the party leadership, and there's a balance there in terms of who gets to call the shots, and it depends on what committee it is. The more influential committees, that makes the chairs of those committees very powerful people, and of course that also, that should also be expressed in terms of the amount of lobbyist money that flows their way. And in some of these chairmanships that are very powerful and control a lot of money in the economy, Ways and Means, of course, being one of them because they're the tax writing committee, appropriations because they're the tax spending committee. They attract a lot of donations. And by the way, what usually happens because of limitations on how much PAC money can be spent on an individual member who is, let's say, an influential member of the committee or perhaps chair of the committee, campaign finance law capping how much you can get, what lobbyists having, in some cases, bottomless pockets. What do you do if you want to express even more support for somebody who's a friendly chair or who you wish was a friendly chair of a relevant committee? And the answer is you say, why don't you start a leadership PAC and I'll put excess funds in that, and then you can pass that out and become more powerful. Or if you are, let's say, the ranking member because you're in the minority, it looks like you might move into the majority sometime soon. Maybe you want to shore up your position. Perhaps there's somebody else on the committee with as much seniority as you, and you might have to campaign to win the chairmanship when the House turns over. Here's some extra money. That's kind of the way things work. As far as decisions about what bills should and shouldn't be moved or expedited, they like largely to leave that up to the committees, but when it doesn't look like it's going the way the leadership would like it to, they're usually on the same page, the party leadership and the committee chairs. When they're not, and it's an important one, if it's a messaging bill and it's about taxes and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee isn't cooperating, then you start to lean on them and you say, well, look, we really need you wouldn't have chosen this bill necessarily to go first, but we think you should, and here's our reasons why. And if that doesn't work, you can suck it up or lean on them in other ways and say, let's say, for instance, that other thing that you wanted, which isn't under the jurisdiction of your committee, maybe that doesn't move. Maybe it doesn't move as quickly. Maybe the Appropriations Committee can be convinced not to agree with you necessarily on how much you're authorizing $1 billion for this. Maybe Appropriations only wants to put $500 million into the program. And then, of course, there are other committees that are considered leadership committees, like the Rules Committee in the House is traditionally considered to be controlled by the Speaker and the high-up leadership. And they very often consult very closely, let's say, with the Rules Committee chair about what sort of rule they'd like to see for every bill that's coming to the floor. For instance, we have a lot of members who need protection from tough votes on this one, and the Republicans are going to bring a gotcha amendment. Can we make sure that the rule doesn't include that amendment? Things like that. So, it's a pretty vague answer. But like everything in coalition politics, there's some give and take from both sides. It generally flows in the direction of generally the direction of what happens inside of a committee starts with the chairman. They're meant to have some autonomy. That's something that has come over many years and many reform fights. It used to be the case that it was controlled much more tightly by the Speaker, and the Speaker could dictate this is what's going to happen inside this committee. And usually the committee chairs didn't object all that much because they were more or less ideologically on the same page. That's how they got to be there in the first place. They were henchmen, and they didn't have that much autonomy to rebel. But as Greg was telling us about historically the other day, Joe Cannon, very powerful Republican Speaker, found himself on the wrong end of a revolt by the committee chairs over things like that. And since those days, increasingly the committees are handled as autonomous entities. And it only comes up when top leadership disagrees with them and says, we're doing a messaging thing here and you got to bend a little bit. And depending on what kind of leverage and what kind of things they're talking about, they tend to bend. Because also, of course, the check and balance here is the chair decides which bills that come under its jurisdiction will have priority and therefore be reported out, and in what format they'll be reported out. But it's the majority leader whose job it is to schedule bills for floor action. So if you have a serious disagreement and a committee bill that the chairman wants and the leadership doesn't, and they report it out, the majority leader, if he's on the same page as the speaker, will then tend to say, all right, it might not come up all that quickly, or maybe it only comes up next year, or maybe it comes up in conjunction with another bill and we combine the two of them. And the speaker and majority leader in tandem can speak to the rules committee. And, even if you're finally forced to bring the thing to the floor, maybe it doesn't come to the floor with the rule that the committee chairman wanted. There's a lot of places to intervene and have those fights. All right. That's the process thing. That leaves us less time, but we still have tomorrow, of course, to talk about some of the other things. And some of them are kind of crazy and we should get to. And some of them you've already been talking about out there amongst yourselves, probably on the ones on the Trump-Russia front and the Deutsche Bank front. But other items that are going to require discussion are out there. One, might as well make at least a quick note about this one. CNN reporting late last night that the Trump administration was set to announce a bump stock ban after all this time. Remember, I think that that one arose, or the idea of it arose from out of the Las Vegas shooting, which is now more than a year in the past. And we all figured that Donald Trump had either forgotten about that or was ducking it because the NRA turned out to be, angry and annoyed about the bump stock ban. I guess I don't know whether it matters a whole lot ultimately, because we've talked a bit about bump firing and bump stocks here. Bump stocks make it easier to bump fire a semi-automatic weapon with more precision, but bump stocks are not the thing that makes it possible to fire a semi-automatic weapon as though it were a machine gun, as rapidly as if it was a machine gun. All semi-automatic weapons are capable of doing that without additional equipment, and that's not something that gun owners or gun enthusiasts or the NRA or anybody really wants you to know or think about, and so they'll focus on the bump stocks. And the bump stocks are a tremendous advantage. They make it very easy to do and to actually aim when you do it, and that's kind of important. Anyway, so here's the news. The Trump administration, according to CNN, plans to announce the long-anticipated federal rule officially banning bump stocks in the coming days. And Trump did it Trump style, I think. He said, we're going to ban those things. And everybody thought, he's going to run into problems with the NRA. He's going to have to back off. It doesn't work like that. But it looks like the rule he got is very Trump-like in its drafting. Bump stocks gained national attention, the article continues, last year after a gunman in Las Vegas rigged his weapons with the devices to fire on concert goers, killing 58 people. Remember that? Wounding 600, right? President Donald Trump vowed to outlaw the devices soon after the tragedy, and some lawmakers on Capitol Hill urged him to back a permanent legislative fix. But opposition from lawmakers and the National Rifle Association ultimately made a regulatory change the only realistic path forward to accomplishing the president's goal. The devices make it easier to fire rounds from a semi-automatic weapon by harnessing the gun's recoil to bump the trigger faster, an operation that caused officials at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives during the Obama administration to conclude that it's merely a gun accessory or firearm part and not subject to federal regulation. At Trump's direction, however, the Justice Department submitted a proposed final rule earlier this year that upended the Obama-era interpretation, and I think it's a good one, and concluded that bump fire stocks, slide fire devices, and devices with similar characteristics all fall within the prohibition on machine guns by allowing a shooter of a semi-automatic firearm to initiate a continuous firing cycle with a single pull of the trigger, and therefore they are illegal under federal law. I mean, that's surprisingly aggressive, in fact. I mean, I also think it's subject challenge, and I don't know whether they really were counting on that or what, but this is it. Under the new rule, bump stock owners would be required to destroy or surrender the devices to authorities. That's like, wow. Okay. Members of the public will be given 90 days to turn in or otherwise discard their bump stocks, according to a source familiar with the final rule. Bump stocks turn semi-automatic guns into illegal machine guns. This final rule sends a clear message. Illegal guns have no place in a law and order society, and we will continue to vigorously enforce the law to keep these illegal weapons off the streets, says a senior Justice Department official. Unnamed. Do you really have to do that anonymously? Republican lawmakers, who are typically opposed to federal agencies writing regulations to accomplish what Congress hasn't directly legislated, had insisted that the Justice Department and ATF write a new regulation. Whereas some Democrats, such as Dianne Feinstein of California, have repeatedly cautioned that such a ban would likely result in lawsuits given ATF's earlier interpretation. ATF acting director, did you know we were working with an acting director? Thomas Brandon acknowledged in a Senate hearing this summer that he has been advised that banning bump fire stocks through executive regulation could lead to court challenges that would delay the implementation of a ban. Trump said last month he told the NRA bump stocks are gone. But how the group responds to the final rule remains to be seen. Well, that's probably right. There'll probably be a big lawsuit. I don't know whether it's intentional that Trump is going this route because he knows that a lawsuit might be able to block it or set it back, but he wants to look like he's doing something, or whether he genuinely wants to, get rid of them all. That's a very Trump-style thing to try to do. I guess I bring it up, one, because it's interesting, and two, we'll have to keep an eye on it to see how quickly it's implemented and how quickly it's challenged. And three, to remind you that for all the talk, the truth is that go ahead, ban every bump stock you can. Semi-automatic guns can be turned into illegal machine guns with your bare hands because guess what? They've fooled you for 100 plus years. Semi-automatic weapons are basically automatic weapons, and they can all fire that way. And if you don't believe me, go to YouTube and search bump fire semi-automatic. Pick your favorite semi-automatic. Bump fire a Glock. Bump fire. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You don't even have to name one. And YouTube is chock full of videos of people sometimes explaining how it's done, sometimes just doing it, but basically taking your run-of-the-mill garden variety semi-automatic pistol and firing it like a machine gun, emptying the clip, rat-a-tat-tat, and then going, woo, it's so cool. They're usually just shooting, into a ravine or something dumb like that. Very rarely actually shooting at a target. It just seems to be something people out in the country like to do, and they think it's fun. And the truth is any semi-automatic can do it, and they think that's fun too. And, the only difference is, I guess if you're firing into a crowd of concert goers, it doesn't matter whether you have to aim or not. The bump stock makes it easier to aim, and it makes it easier to do with longer and more accurate rifles than, as opposed to the handguns. But, okay, there you have it. That's news. We'll watch how that one develops. Other, probably more important news. How do we even want to deal with this? Do we have time to get through this? I'll just lay it out there because I don't know. We'll have to deal with it tomorrow anyway on Friday. Friday, I'm sure we'll also spend some more time going over the Jeffrey Epstein news, even though it's not news. I mean, I guess we don't have to go over it too much, but maybe some more developments once the story has had another day to percolate. But I'm glad that I paid enough attention to have told you a long time ago that Alex Acosta was going to get wrapped up in this thing, and that Jeffrey Epstein was, well, I didn't have to tell you he was a scumbag. Oh, yes, right. The new revelations, though, about the terms of his imprisonment are rather shocking. And maybe we can discuss that by tomorrow. But basically it was, remember, he got busted on, serial child molestation. And he ended up doing 13 months in jail, and then most of that wasn't even in the jail. First of all, it was in the county lockup. Second of all, he somehow managed to arrange it that he would get a private wing of a county jail. No other prisoners in his wing. Eventually, he ended up hiring his own guards and was released 6 days a week for 12 hours a day on quote-unquote work release, even though Florida law apparently prohibits, I don't know if it's Florida law or county practice, but at any rate, he, as a sex offender, he should have been prohibited from eligibility, blocked from eligibility for work release. But they just decided, maybe he will have it anyway. So, he's a billionaire. He bought himself a nice cushy office and he left jail 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and just went and luxuriated in his own office and then would go back and sleep in his private wing. It's really a tragic situation. And just once again, a crystalline example of how there are separate justice systems for people with money. But I got to plant a different seed in the middle of all the Trump-Russia thing. And I'll borrow here from Dorati, who has a diary up at Daily Kos and has aggregated a tweet storm or two of a very important story entitled, let's just read it. This is the diary titled, SCOTUS blogs Tom Goldstein's motion to install Rosenstein as Attorney General. This is an interesting thing. I did not see the play coming. We've spoken in the last couple of days about various legal maneuverings, people who are already in the middle of lawsuits against the Department of Justice and who have named the Attorney General personally as a defendant, and they need to be able to know who to put on their suit instead of Jeff Sessions, who's now out. And they were using that as a platform to question whether or not Whitaker really was acting Attorney General, whether he had been appointed legally or not, and whether they could get a court to rule on it. But this apparently a lawsuit that simply goes straight at it and says, not only do I think Matt Whitaker ought not to be considered the acting Attorney General, but the state of the law and the intent of the founders essentially basically tells us, no, we should go right to the conclusion that Rod Rosenstein is acting Attorney General and Matt Whitaker is not. So here's Girardi's compilation of things here. He starts off with some notes up at the top that Thomas C. Goldstein, known simply as Tom Goldstein, is an American attorney known for his advocacy before and blogging about the Supreme Court. Over the past 15 years, Goldstein has served as one of the lawyers for one of the parties in just under 10% of the cases argued before the Supreme Court. How do you like that? And I don't know whether, let's see. All right. Okay. So now, turning to the source for this material, jurist.org, we now have this excerpt in Girardi's diary here. Lawyer Tom Goldstein, on Friday, so we missed it for some days, asked the U.S. Supreme Court to appoint Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein as the acting Attorney General, replacing Matthew Whitaker. That would have, I guess, been last Friday, and we didn't know about it until it's almost Friday now. Goldstein claims that Whitaker was illegally installed, I agree, as the temporary successor of former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and that Rosenstein is the legal and constitutional successor to Sessions. The motion argues that as the Senate-confirmed Deputy Attorney General, Rosenstein automatically succeeded to the role of acting Attorney General under 28 U.S. Code Section 508A and the Appointments Clause of Article 2 of the Constitution. The motion calls for the court to resolve this dispute immediately. The Attorney General has a number of responsibilities, including appointing immigration judges, determining whether to enforce federal statutes, and overseeing the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Yes, one of those small duties that this person will have. Now, key passages, I guess, from the filing itself, and that's what's been getting passed around Twitter, make a very forceful argument in a very brief amount of time here. It comes straight out, in case you were wondering if we were in a constitutional crisis here. This is a constitutional crisis. That's the key passage beginning here. It is a constitutional crisis, and many of you will recognize that that word was constitutional. I muddled it. It is a constitutional crisis even if we are distracted from and dulled to it. We certainly have that problem. Article 2 of the Constitution requires that principal officers, including the Attorney General, be confirmed by the Senate. For the first time in the nation's history, the president has forced out a principal officer and replaced him with a non-confirmed appointee, indeed refusing to submit him or anyone else for confirmation. That's the key issue here. That hand-picked successor was best known for his views that the Department of Justice should limit or shut down an active criminal investigation into whether the president and his campaign colluded with a foreign power and obstructed justice. That's a bit of a new twist, too. That appointee now controls the investigation, and shouldn't, I would say. And I'm sure that's what he means. The president made the appointment in a fashion calculated to prevent the Constitution's enforcement because the special counsel leading the investigation is barred by law from raising the issue and because it will be mooted before any other case can reach the court. The president has gone well past disheartening tweets. This is a power grab. It is a power grab designed to protect the president personally by evading the authority and responsibility of the Senate and this court under the Constitution. Yes, the court can blink at that reality, decline to act, and move on, and say it's a political question, for instance, but history will regret that it did. The nation is thankful not merely for a judiciary that forcefully articulates its independence and neutrality, but even more so for one that adapts to the circumstances as required to protect our liberty by responding to assaults on the separation of powers. The motion presents a legal question that requires a ruling by this court. It is an epic interbranch conflict over the powers of each one. Checks and balances are everywhere. The president forced out a Senate-confirmed principal officer. He then issued an order personally selecting someone else who he refused to nominate. That order seeks to evade not only the Senate's right and obligation under Article 2 of the Constitution to decide whether to consent, but also an on-point statute enacted by Congress, the Attorney General Succession Act. Just as important, this question will probably evade this court's review forever if it doesn't act very soon. Yes, other challenges to the appointment are now being briefed in the lower courts, but even assuming the parties can establish standing, the issue is going to be mooted. Again, it is striking that the Solicitor General notes the pendency of that litigation, citing just a few of the examples, but never even obliquely suggests to the court that any of these cases will provide this court, the Supreme Court, with a vehicle to decide the issue. If he could have, he would have. And I guess he didn't. And so there you have it. That's what's circulating around. The full motion is available for you to view at the by a link at the bottom of the diary, which of course we'll provide you to look at by this afternoon. But yeah, I mean, he goes straight at it here and makes a very interesting. I mean, I'm not certain even in what capacity he has decided he can weigh in here, but I'm glad he's giving it a try. So, yeah, it is a constitutional crisis. We shouldn't be accepting. I'm glad that this has brought it to the fore. I'm hopeful. I'm not hopeful. I wish that reporters would take it seriously and just literally stop referring to Whitaker as the acting attorney general, or at least say only that he's the purported acting attorney general. I think he's made some serious points here. And I'll be very interested to see whether they don't simply duck this thing. I think that's sort of in their nature. And that's kind of the direction that we're going to go. Meanwhile, they make the very salient point in all of this that Trump hasn't bothered to name a new attorney general. So it's not a matter of, well, we need to have this guy as temporary acting attorney general pending the Senate's approval of someone else. I think it's very important, and it might end up mooting part of the case if he were to simply say, all right, fine, I'm going to nominate somebody for Attorney General. One of the dangers, though, in all of this is in the Epstein expose that everybody's been reading in the last day, it turns out that one of the people that was on, I guess, some, maybe fictional shortlist for the Attorney General spot on a permanent basis would be Alex Acosta. I guess he's going to be off the list. But if he's not, another opportunity to talk that through. Maybe we'll dissect that story a little bit more tomorrow, and many other things that are still out there that we haven't had a chance to bring you. But, of course, as always, we are followed by the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Time now for Justice Putnam to pick up the slack on things we may have missed. Let's see what he's got here. Oh, a former Fox News pundit ripped into Trump for his ignorance of world affairs, his neglect of the Ukraine situation, and his special relationship with Putin. And I think they are set to meet in the next couple of days again, aren't they?
On networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's some more from L.A. A sudden purge. Numerous top L.A. County sheriff officials will be fired or relieved of duty once Alex Villanueva is sworn in as the new sheriff. And a Project Veritas-linked operative tried to use Sierra Club credentials to access Democratic campaigns. Wow, still going on, eh? We'll be back tomorrow.